name is Emily. I'm the social media coordinator and creative director for MTNA, and I'm going to be moderating the event today. So before we open up the floor for general audience questions, I'd like to ask Professor Worsley a couple questions that the MTNA board brainstormed. So first, can you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and your experience?
Sure. Can we sit? Is that okay? I'm Eddie. Nice to meet you. We haven't officially met. So nice to meet you. What was the question? Say it one more time.
Can you tell us a little bit about your life and your experience?
Okay. Yeah, that's a big question. So I am a clarinetist, and I'm from California. I'm from Southern California. I was raised in Huntington Beach, and loved music. I come from a musical family. My mom was a pianist, and she was, I think, 8 months pregnant with me when she gave her final dissertation recital at USC. And some of my earliest memories are like the underbelly of a piano. And she was always accompanying flute students, and so I kind of grew up hearing flute and decided to play the clarinet. But yeah, no, I feel like I'm a byproduct of the public school system. I didn't really take lessons per se regularly or consistently until I got to college. I didn't know I was going to do music until I got to college. It just kind of worked out that way. I didn't know what else I could do. I really liked music, and I thought, well, if I'm going to do something for maybe not the rest of my life, but a significant amount of my life, I'd want to do something that I really like to do. So yeah, I just I didn't really start working hard until college, and just kept dog paddling, and one thing led to another, and here we are. So that's very vague, but that's my story in a nutshell.
So our second question is kind of going off of what you just said. Obviously, when you mentioned that you didn't have an idea until you got to college, but did you have an idea once you decided on music that like what you're doing you'd be doing right now, or has your career path changed? And if it did change, how did you accept those changes?
Oh, those are really good questions. I did not know that I would be doing what I'm doing right now. I love what I do right now, which is kind of a hodgepodge of a lot of things, but I did know I had some very positive mentors in my life, especially once I got to college. There was some like not so good influences in there too, but really tried to resonate with the positive ones, and was basically told that there's a place in music, there's a place for everybody. And I still feel is absolutely true. And for me, I didn't know what that was going to be. I kept my expectations pretty low, but I worked really hard. And I think that's a pretty good combination, is if you work really, really, really hard, but you know, I wasn't like, oh, I need to be the principal clarinetist of the Metropolitan Opera. Like that wasn't even in my stars, in my line of thinking. I just knew I wanted to be good at the clarinet. And I was just talking to Umberto about this the other day, of just continuing to work hard, and then you walk through the doors that are opening up to you. So for me, it was the performance path. You had to choose, when I was an undergrad at Cal State Fullerton, whether you wanted to be music performance or music education. And at that time, culturally, it was very different from each other. And this stigma doesn't really exist anymore, especially there, but at that time, music education majors weren't necessarily practicing all the time, and it was kind of a phone-in degree path at that time. It has obviously changed. We now know that the better that you are at your instrument, the better of an instructor you're going to be, because you have that skill set to help students work through their needs. But yeah, I thought, well, let's see about this performance path. Against the wishes of my parents, actually. My dad really wanted me to stick around and get that teaching credential. and stick it out through music education. He felt that would be more stable for me, and it probably would have been. But I thought, well, I'm just gonna see what happens if I commit to a performance degree, and really started practicing a lot in undergrad. By the time I was a junior or senior in undergrad, I was probably putting in 7 to 8 hours a day of clarinet playing, practicing, and that was an obscene number to me, even my freshman or sophomore year of undergrad. So to step into the commitment to the instrument, to say, if I'm going to call myself a clarinetist, I need to commit to playing the clarinet. But I had no idea what I was going to do, and you try and stay ambitious, you apply for things. If there's any kind of advice I can give around that component, it would be, don't not apply because of something like money, whether it's a summer music festival or the application fee on something. Go for it. Just go for it as if money was not involved. And oftentimes people in the organization will help figure it out with you. Like if you get accepted and they want you there, you can say, great, well, I can only afford this much. What can you do for me? And then you have actually some leveraging power in that capacity. Like I said, summer music festivals are no exception to that. So yeah, just for me, it was a matter of just continuing forward and taking up the opportunities. I was accepted. I knew I wanted to study after undergrad with a guy named Joaquin Valdepeñas, who was principal clarinetist of the Toronto Symphony. I knew about him because he was a Cal State Fullerton alum, and everyone still talked about Joaquin. Oh my God, he's amazing. And so I knew I had flown out there to Canada to take a lesson, just to see if he and I got along, and we did. I applied to both of the schools that he taught at in Toronto, and which was at that time it was the University of Toronto, and then this conservatory, the Glenn Gould School. I was rejected from the University of Toronto, and I was really, really bummed. Obviously, rejection is hard. I've been rejected a lot. If that's a good thing, I recommend it. Failing, getting rejected, these are good things to go through regularly. But yeah, after that I was like, oh no, I guess I'm not going to Canada. What am I going to do with my life? But then I got accepted to this conservatory, which was crazy because they only took 4 clarinetists in the whole school. And I asked him, we had a conversation about it later. I was like, why did you accept me here and not at U of T? Like, what? And he's like, I didn't want you to go there. I wanted you to come to the conservatory. So those kinds of things were very eye-opening in that you work hard, you get vulnerable, you apply to these things, you audition to these things, and the doors will open as they're supposed to. I'm not really deeply religious or anything anymore, but I do feel like most of the time it's really weird. It usually turns out the way it's supposed to, given where you're at in your own life. So I didn't expect to land here at this awesome job in this awesome school with these awesome students. But I am grateful every day that it ended up being in music. I'll just say one more thing to this question. So when I was younger, both my parents worked a lot. We didn't see them very much. But every day my dad would come home pretty late from work, and my sister and I would run to the back door and greet him, Dad, yay, you're home, yay. And we'd be like, how's work? And he'd be like, I don't want to talk about it. Every day. He was an accountant, and he hated his job. And I thought, even as a little kid, I was like, I don't ever want to be like that. I never want to come home and think that I had a horrible day at work. I want to do something that I enjoy. And so I think for that reason, having that example of a person who, worked hard and did his thing, but I still get frustrated with that, untapped, what had he, pursued what he really liked, what kind of attitude one can have. So I think that's a huge deal. And fortunately, music finds us, right? We're all here because music found us in some way, shape, or form. So hang on to that. Anyway, I guess that answers your questions.
So we already kind of talked about it a little bit, but what was your experience like auditioning for schools? And what sort of advice do you have for people who are preparing to audition or preparing to transfer?
Okay, great questions. Let's see. When preparing for schools, shop around. You guys have the benefit of the internet, not to super date myself, but like that stuff wasn't posted when we were auditioning around. Like we just had to kind of guess what the standard repertoire was at these various institutions, and it's like, okay, I guess Mozart's gonna be on there, and I guess these excerpts are gonna be on there, but nowadays, most of that is public knowledge just because it's on their website. So I highly, highly, highly recommend shopping around, like just scoping out your various potential transfer universities. Even the schools that you're like, I don't know if I'll go there, I don't know, like if you're gonna apply there, which you should, like apply everywhere, write that list down, write the rep down on your list, make a master list of everything that could potentially be on your audition repertoire, and go for it. Like learn all the concertos on that list, learn all of the etudes on that list, learn all of the, for us, orchestral excerpts on that list. Because even if you don't end up using it for your audition experiences, you will have learned that repertoire. I had taken a lesson with a guy named Rob Kovacevic when I was like 15 or 16, and he's like, you should sight read from these orchestral excerpt books. Just using the sight reading. I was like, okay, it's like instead of etude books, you just kind of read a new one each day or whatever. And that became some of the best advice I'd ever heard, especially for these entrance auditions. When you had sight reading, they were excerpts. So I could sight read Peter and the Wolf. I could sight read Beethoven 9 because I'd been practicing it. So setting yourself up in practice for what you're going to be performing, even when it comes to sight reading, is also up there. And then the second part about schools, what was that again?
Advice for auditioning.
Okay, yeah. Make a chart if you can for practicing. And this isn't just for schools. Eventually, if some of us are instrumentalists or not, or singers, you're going to be auditioning for real symphony orchestras or real choral ensembles or whatever. Discipline will get you everywhere. So if you can create, for me, I would create a chart with like every single day of the month, every single excerpt that I needed to know. Did I practice it that day, yes or no? Did I practice this that day, yes or no? And you don't necessarily have to practice everything every day, but if you have some kind of an organized chart or situation log, something where you can look back and be like, okay, I haven't worked on Capricci Espagnole in 4 days. I need to look at that excerpt today. So just kind of keep yourself organized. It's so ironic, and I'm just like gonna share this with all of you. I am the biggest space cadet you will ever meet. Like I used to forget everything. When I was like first starting out freelancing, I lost a lot of jobs because I would just forget, or books, stuff, I would just leave it. I would forget it everywhere. My dad was so patient. Margaret, if your head wasn't attached, you'd like leave it on the school bus. Like I'm just a flighty magoo. It's so bad. So much so that I realized very early that I had to be organized. I had to write things down in order to like life. And it got even more imperative as you start adulting and you have real commitments and real things that you have to show up for. And if I know now if I don't write it down, it won't get done, which is I think it's interesting now because of literally my greatest weakness has become one of my greatest strengths, and that is just being organized. It has helped me win auditions. It's purely because of the organization of how I'm practicing, which is insane to think about because, like I said, I'm a total space cadet. So that kind of thing is perhaps worth an exercise for us all. What is your biggest weakness, like in general? What is your weakness, or weaknesses? And don't shy away from them. Really look at them and figure out how you're going to work through that, how you're going to turn it into an advantage for yourself. Because everyone is different. and your tactic towards that will also be different. But I feel like it's a great sense of turning into an adult is switching those things around, whether it's, you know, not being very organized, or I'm not a people person, I'm really, really, really shy. Okay, well, I'm gonna work through my shyness in these ways, and then by, you know, 10 years from now, you might be very, very good with people, because you've tackled it, you've worked on it, you've confronted it. So lean into those spaces of vulnerability if you can, especially now when you are younger. It's very, very good to do. So I think I answered that question. I'm sorry. I'm not used to this.
Okay, so the final board question is, how do you balance being a musician and teaching and having a social life outside of music? If you have a social life.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I would say I do. But what's nice is, and you guys already are probably very in tune with this, like there are some people in your life that you can see once a year and you just pick up where you left off, and you're just like, you know, it's like no time has passed. Those are the kinds of people that you want to keep in your life. As we get older, it is harder to make connections with people, and you realize that having friends is hard work. Like I work really hard to keep my friends and to have my friends. I don't have very many of them, but they're the family you get to choose are your friends. And you know, no matter what your actual family is like, keep that in mind as you move through life. Who do you admire? Who inspires you? Who keeps you on your shit? Like, who's like, Maggie, we got a test on Wednesday, you better study, like, you're in my life forever, let's go. Because I personally could never have made it through grad school life without my friends. Like, I depend very deeply on them. And what's cool about music is, when you grow up, you get to continue working with your friends. Like, that's who you hire, that's who you recommend for other jobs. I went to school with Steve Bompard. He and I are friends. Like, we get to work together. I went to school with Jenny Amaya. Like, I have visions of her with like crazy short hair practicing accordion on the 3rd floor of Cal State Fullerton. Like, these people don't go away. We stay in these orbits around each other. And yeah, no, it's important. But how do we balance, to your question? I don't know. I think I'm still trying to figure that one out, to be perfectly candid. It's important to work hard. I find embracing the process and trying to observe how I feel about everything, like just check in with the feels, is really good and really important. Because for me, learning to embrace and love the process of learning and love the process of getting better, and not just like succeeding, but like getting better and, you know, getting worse. Like, we have our ups and downs, and kind of trying to stay happy with that cycle is really good. Again, staying organized. Like, I have to write in to my schedule when we're gonna hang out with friends, with your people, with your tribe. Write that in and take it just as seriously as you would a class. It's good. So, bye. So yeah, commit to that, because that what you need to fill the cup of your soul just as much as you need to fill your bank account with the gigs that you're going to get when you practice a lot and sound good on that gig. So yeah, you can prioritize both. But honestly, I don't know what the quote-unquote balance is yet. I don't know if that exists for musicians, especially when we're working, we're having fun, so it's kind of the same thing. So yeah.
Okay, so now we would like to open up the floor to anybody. If you have any questions, just raise your hand.
I wanted to ask, while you were earning your degree, what sort of jobs or internships were you doing?
Good question. I've had a lot of jobs, and I've been working since I was 17. Most of them were not music oriented. Most of them were like, you need to pay rent, you need a job. So when I was an undergrad at Cal State Fullerton, I started working at Tower Records, which was a thing and a place. It was awesome. Lots of interesting experiences there. from a sheltered girl from Orange County. I was like, what is this place? Like, you know, it was crazy, but very good, and really enjoyed that. But then they moved, and I didn't want to move with them, that particular location. So I started to work in the fine china department at Macy's. And that was great because, who was I telling? Ryan, I feel like we were talking about this. They had like a night short shift, which worked really well with my practicing. I could go to school, practice, and then go to work at like 8 o'clock at night to 11 p.m. And having that short shift in the evenings worked really, really well for me. And then I was asked by my alma mater, it was a different band director, but my high school alma mater, to be an assistant band director. So I was going down there a couple days a week, back down to Huntington, and helping out with them in their ensembles, teaching clarinet lessons, which is, I was bad at it and I didn't like it, teaching clarinet at first. I was like, I don't want to teach, this is awful, like I'm really bad at this. But again, you know, that concept of like finding what you're bad at and confronting it and trying to tackle it, make it better. That is absolutely what has happened with me anyway, with teaching. Let's see, when I moved up to Canada, I was not allowed to work for like legally, so everything was under the table. Maybe we shouldn't put this on the internet. Yeah, so I was working at a couple of, they call them colleges, but they were high school programs up there, and giving sectionals, doing clinics, that kind of a thing, and then gigging a little bit up there. And then in Michigan, I worked at a horse farm, and where I was like, and this is, you know, Michigan, it snows, it gets very cold in the winter and it gets very hot in the summer. So in the winter, you'd have to go out with a hammer and like break the ice in their ice troughs and try not to get trampled. You'd have to make sure that everyone was fed, had the right meds, all the things. But I was also working at an Irish pub, so I would I'd be serving beer to inebriated college students until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and then I had to be at the barn to feed these horses at like 4 o'clock in the morning. I was extremely tired in grad school, and you kind of learn your limit then of, you know, sanity and how much sleep you actually need, and I don't know if I recommend it, but yeah, I think every time I had a job that was paying the bills but wasn't music, I would tell myself, this is temporary. This is only temporary. I only have to do this right now because I got bigger plans. I got bigger goals. Like, I want to make all my money through music. For me, that was my goal. And to kind of remind myself, not in a shameful way, like, what are you doing with your life? You're like just scooping up poop. Like, that's not healthy. But just saying, I like this. I am enjoying my job. This is physical. I get to be outside. This is awesome. Also, this is temporary. Like, I'm not going to be shoveling crap for the rest of my life. So, yeah, no, it's you do the work you have to do, but keeping that internal dialogue of, you know, your eye on the prize. Like, what do you ultimately want to be making your bread, and how is that? And you may not even know, but you just know that this is not it for now. So, yeah.
How would you say is the best way to make connections in the music world in terms of performance or education?
Oh, that's a good question, because those are separate, performance and education, for sure. I'll start with education. So this concept of taking lessons with your potential future teacher is really good and really important. And again, compared to our conversation the other day, and I'm just gonna out you. You had mentioned feeling kind of like nervous or bad about like shopping around for a teacher. Like, I don't want to feel like or look like I'm shopping. Yeah, you are. You should shop around for teachers, because that's what you should do. Like, if you think, okay, I really want to go to UCLA. UCLA is my #1 school. It's the only school I'm going to apply to. And you get there and your teacher's an asshole. Like, that sucks. Like, don't set yourself up like that. Like, shop around. The best teacher I ever had was, no one knew who she was. This was at University of Michigan. I had been, you know, we had studio class every week, and people would come in to prepare for auditions and play for Joaquin, and the whole studio class would hear this person kind of coming through. And there was a guy named Mika Hillman and he's in the Winnipeg Symphony now, but he was like preparing an audition, playing through his excerpts, and I was like, holy moly, he didn't say moly, but holy moly, you sound amazing, who did you study with? And he's like, oh, this woman, she's in Michigan, she's fantastic, Deborah Hodacki, she'll change your life. And again, everyone was going to University of Michigan to study with Fred Ormond, but I went down and had a lesson with her, and was like, we had a 3.5-hour lesson. She blew my mind, like immediately, like very good chemistry. I learned a bunch from her immediately. I was like, oh my God, this is a woman I need to study with. And she is the most prominent voice in my dialogue that I find myself sharing with my own students. But going back to your question about connections, so do seek out these teachers that are inspiring you in whatever way that is, whether it's the way that they play, or you've seen them in master classes. Are you schlepping out to LA to go to these master classes at USC, or to go to studio class at Cal State Fullerton? Like, these are usually open environments that you can just pop in and, trust your instincts, trust the vibe. Like, if you think that person is like not who you want to work with, you're probably right. So find someone who you do want to work with and do want to study with, and signing yourself up for lessons is good. As for professional connections, that we call it the game. You got to play the game, and I wouldn't discourage anyone from doing this. Personally, I am not aggressive in this capacity, and I have horrible advice to give because I don't do it. All of the studio work that I've done is basically from like really close friends who happen to get the job in the studio. I am not personally signing myself up for lessons with these big studio people, because that's not what I want to do. I started saying no to Sony and to Fox when I got a full-time job about 9 years ago at Valley, because I have to teach theory at 9 in the morning. I can't schlep out to LA. Like I had these commitments, and I had to make a choice at that point. Like, what do I want to do? Do I want to have this freelance studio lifestyle, which works for a lot of people and could work for many of you in this room, but it's more hand to mouth. It's exciting, but it's more hand to mouth and less stable than working at full-time at a community college, or I get deep fulfillment from working with the students that I get to work with. So there were choices to make, but those connections come from having lessons with people. Just call them up, hey, can I have a lesson with you? Hey, can I have a lesson with you? Hey, save your money, work at pouring the Guinness, and like, okay, save your pennies, save your tips, save all the things for lessons. But that's the number one recommendation for connections, is like having lessons with people.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I have a question for like music majors in general. So like for performance majors and education majors, what do you think is the best college to go to and why?
That's a good question. There's so many really good ones. Back in the day, really Cal State Fullerton was the only one that like wasn't as expensive as USC, but it was all of the professors that were teaching at USC were also teaching at Cal State Fullerton, and that is still not necessarily the case, but it is pretty prevalent to have the same profs that are at USC also teach at Cal State Fullerton, and that was by design. But nowadays, I don't want to knock anybody. Cal State Fullerton is fantastic. These other Cal States have really stepped up their game as far as quality of education, and as a music education major, if any of you are, you want to be aware of the professional networks that they have, because you are getting placed in an ensemble for your student teaching, depending on what relationships that institution has. So one exercise is to just kind of notice who's getting the jobs and where did they go to school. And that goes not just for local educators, but it goes for performers too. Like who's winning the jobs and who do they study with. So I guess I should answer your question. Cal State Fullerton is up there. Cal State Long Beach has their act together. Cal State Northridge has come a very long way and is worth it. Cal State LA, I think, is also on the up and up in most of their program. It's great, but UCs are doing well too. They've notoriously been more research heavy, so you're going to do a lot more writing and research, which can be a distractant from practicing. I don't even know if distracting is a word, whatever. It can be distracting from practicing, so you want to be aware of that. But yeah, UCLA, USC, we're so lucky in Southern California. Like if you're born in Podunk, Iowa, you have like one choice to go to college. Like we've got a bunch of choices and they're all not terrible and many of them are affordable. And that's one hot tip I would highly recommend to try and keep in mind is if you can avoid debt for your undergrad. Save debt for your grad school, that's fine. But for your undergrad, if you can do it debt free, that's ideal. 2 thumbs up. You know, try and pick a good school that won't break your bank, where you can still like work your part-time job and make that tuition work, which I know is harder and harder, but you can do it. You can do hard things. Yeah.
So, since you have experience as the principal clarinetist of the San Bernardino Symphony, how has it been working and communicating with your peers, and what do you recommend, what advice do you recommend in maintaining a healthy environment with your coworkers in the symphony?
That's an interesting question because we don't see each other very much. And I'm not, I wouldn't say that I'm like friends with the principals in our woodwind section. I have deep respect and collegiality with them, but we are not a full-time orchestra, so we don't get to see each other every week. So some of those bonds that you build naturally, like as a student, with each other, both socially and musically, we have to really just put our spidey senses on and try and make sure that we are creating like as efficient, as beautiful, as easygoing of an environment as we can, given the limited amount of time that we have together. So when we have a concert for the San Bernardino Symphony, we typically will have only rehearsals that week. So you have to make sure all of your repertoire is like done, ready to go, like not just your notes and your rhythms, but like it has to be interesting, it has to be musical. You come in with it perfect, and then it changes depending on what you're hearing, depending on what the maestro wants. But it's high stakes, it's pretty intense. And so I think just knowing your knowing your stuff, and being a good person, just being nice, those 2 things are a recipe for success wherever you go. So just know your stuff and be nice, and everything should work out. So pull your own and you know, be cool, like whatever. But it is hard in that capacity to like just pick up, you know, especially depending on the repertoire. We might have some conversations like, oh, my tendency on this note is really sharp. Is there any way that we could bring it, you know, up just a little bit? Whatever. You already are foreseeing those issues, and there are more that will pop up as you're rehearsing, and you can just like continue chatting through that. But being kind is good. Approach is everything. So if you hear like, I don't know, the flutist in front of you that is really out of tune on that note, you know, it's probably not a good idea to be like, yeah, no, out of tune you are on that thing. You, like, you know, it's use inclusive language. That's like a leadership skill, right? Like, can we maybe play this? No, let's do this way. What do you think about, you know, like just, you know, having a good approach that is collegial, that will keep you friends is a good idea as you continue to navigate those relationships. But yeah, it's interesting, you know, like you have your like work, your work spouses almost, like these people, your work family, people that you see every day at work. But that, I think, sometimes it's the same as your social life, but most of the time it's going to be different. So I think it's good to to kind of separate that. For me personally, that's how things have been able to work out really well for my own sanity, so it doesn't get too dramatic. Yeah. Anyways, yeah.
I know you talked about being organized, but what are some other changes that you made to your practice routine that you think had the biggest impact on your like performance and music?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, in Toronto, in grad school, I started to notice that some of my friends were winning jobs. And I was just kind of paying attention to when they practiced, how they practiced, how serious they were about practicing, what their social lives were like. I just wanted to know how people were doing it. The first friend I knew who won a job, his name was Marcus, he was a trombone player. He was hardcore. He had this huge practice chart in his room and would mark off every day what he had gone through. He had a very, very strict routine. He was waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning to do his like serious strict warm up. He was very like almost militaristic with his approach. And then, yeah, other friends who were winning jobs, I noticed were the ones that were in the practice rooms, the first to be there and the last to leave. They were just putting in the time. And so I was like, well, shoot, if they can do that, maybe I can do that too. But it got harder trying to behave that way and like really give the clarinet everything I could, especially as we get busier with work. It's harder to find the time to practice. When I won the job for San Bernardino Symphony, it was a blind audition through the finals, which is rare, especially in LA. The game is still played that way. Like you'll get as far as you can, and then they'll take the screen down for the finals, and then they'll just pick who they want. But I'm so grateful for this job because it was blind through the finals. And yeah, I was working at 3 colleges at that point, and the only time I could practice was basically between 10 and 11 o'clock at night over at Mount Sac. And so I was exhausted, but I just committed my little 45 minutes to an hour every day, stayed as organized as I could in that particular schedule leading up to the audition, and happened to have a good day. I was competing with everyone in LA. It was crazy, but I had taken a bunch of auditions up to that point too, and had passed the final round, or passed the first round, but not passed the first round, passed, not passed, whatever. Like, you just kind of go through like it's a regular old audition, and Frank Fetta just heard something in my particular sound for that particular day on those particular excerpts that happened to align with, what he wanted to hear. So it just worked out. But yeah, this concept of staying organized to lead up to that was everything, especially when you start running out of time adulting and working on other things. You can do it. You can do it. I used to say, you can sleep when you're dead, but I don't think that's very healthy. I don't say that anymore. Like, sleep is good and important. You should sleep.
How do you find out about auditions like around the area?
Good question. The union sends out a newsletter which has, so the AFM, the American Federation of Musicians, sends out a newsletter, and in the back are always the auditions. So I don't recommend joining the union until you absolutely have to. Like, don't join the union until you get a union gig and they're like, yeah, Lady Gaga's in town, we want you to do this concert in the union, and you can just say, yep, and then join that day. But that's a good one. I had a buddy who was already in it, and she's the one who ended up telling me about the San Bernardino Symphony job, because I don't think I was in the union at that point. Or I was, but I was in, it doesn't matter. So they're there. Musical chairs is a big one. Fortunately, with the internet as well, we have musical chairs. And I like musical chairs lately too, because it's not just national and international auditions. They also have music festivals and what's it called? Not just festivals, but like music schools. Like if someone is looking for a full-time clarinetist to teach at such and such a school, oftentimes they'll put it on musical chairs. And you can get updates from musical chairs too. So like when an audition comes up, they'll be like, hey, there's an audition happening. Here's the website. So that's really nice, because it used to be word of mouth. And fortunately, I think fortunately, the internet has changed that, so that's good. Yeah. Yeah.
Hardest piece you've ever played?
The hardest piece I've ever played? Oh, it's a tie between Nielsen Clarinet Concerto, which is what at that point it was the hardest thing I ever learned, and Barber's Summer Music, the quintet. Have you played that? It's insane. There's like 6 flats in it. It's like really hard for clarinet anyway, and it goes very, very fast. So yeah, either Nielsen Concerto or Barber Summer Music. Ugh. You're just triggering me now. But once you, like, the hardest piece of music that you have ever played will someday just be a piece of music you can play. Like, you can't get to that next level unless you're swimming with the sharks, unless you're like swimming in uncharted territory. It's like walking through a room blindfolded and you don't know where all the furniture is, but eventually, you hit enough things and you figure it out and you walk in a room a lot and you just figure out where everything is and then you can play it. It's amazing what practicing can do. So, yeah. It's a scary time when you're in your 20s, and I just want to plant this little seed of hopefulness. Like, your 20s are nerve-wracking, they're scary, you're going through all these things. Chemically, it's all crazy too, like whatever. And there's a lot of uncertainty, and so I would encourage any of you to trust your own instincts. You know how you learn, and you will continue learning how you learn. You can be a scientist about this stuff, like make observations of people that you do admire. What's their schedule like? What are they doing? How are they practicing? And trust your gut on that stuff, like really trust your gut. Work hard, but like trust your intuition of where life might be better for you. And then when you get into your 30s, I promise you life gets easier. Suddenly you're making more money. Things are just like you've whittled out your friends. You've got a good core set of friends by the time you're in your 30s. And then when you're in your, when you're in your 40s, you're just like, I don't care about anything. I just do what I want. Like, life is good. Like, you can say no all the time. It's awesome. Yeah, but in your 20s and 30s, you're still kind of like a yes person. Like, oh, you gotta say yes. 30s, you can say no more, but like by your 40s, you're like, no, everything is a no unless I really want to do it. So, yeah. Yeah.
I know we're focusing right now on, we've been talking about your instrumental playing, but I remember seeing you at the conducting workshop for RCC. I was wondering if you could talk a bit about your experience, like the conducting, and kind of how you got into it, and if you prefer almost like instrumental playing over that.
That's a good question. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. I think it's an interesting point in how we have to be versatile and I like that part of music, and I would encourage you to embrace that part too. It's like you don't necessarily know what you're going to end up doing, so you have to kind of prepare yourself for as much as you think you can, trying to have a specialty that will really help you shine amongst the rest. But I didn't start conducting until I started teaching at San Bernardino Valley College, when suddenly I was a band director. And it's like, they needed a band, they needed to have an instrumental program, so I was like, all right, I guess I'm doing this now, and immediately signed myself up for Kevin's conducting symposiums. I did a symposium out in Boston with Frank Battisti and Charles Peltz, and was like, all right, if I'm gonna be a conductor, I wanna do this well. And made sure I was practicing and score studying and committing myself just as much to conducting as I was for clarinet playing. And I really like it. To be perfectly honest, in this space, and I haven't talked to anyone about it really other than my family, but like I'm having a bit of an identity crisis right now, because this new job for me, doesn't have any conducting in it. And I've committed myself for almost a decade now to that skill set, and it's a lifestyle, when you're a conductor. And so to not be doing that, I'm a little like, whoa, what am I doing? What am I doing with my life? But like anything else, you just keep going and you keep working hard, and there's so many more learning opportunities that are opening themselves up now. But yeah, no, the conducting thing is really fun, and I would encourage you to do a lot of it if you can when you're young. When you have the disposal of ensembles that you can just like pop in and you know, get on the podium and do it. Singing a lot is really important. I used to be really afraid of singing when I was an undergrad, but it's something that has profoundly changed my musicianship as I adult and am a professional musician. The more I sing, the better my musicianship is. So I like to sing badly in this crappy little church choir. I'm an atheist, but like I get to sing with these little old ladies, and they're great. We have a good time, and you know, I find myself like leading the alto section because like all of these ear training, sight singing skill sets that we do in undergrad are absolutely what you continue to hone in on when you sing. And then when you conduct, you're singing a lot in your head. You're just like learning your parts and phrasing things and figuring things out in your head, basically through song. So yeah, you never know what you're gonna end up doing. But again, if you like music and you like the process, it's all gonna work out. So who knows, maybe there will be more conducting down the road, but maybe not, and that's okay. We'll just see where life goes. I feel like someone else said their hand up, but maybe not. Yeah.
Like, someone sent this question in to me from afar. Do you take, like, how are your breaks from practicing? Like, when do you know when you need a break, and like, what is your break like? How long is it? What do you do during the break?
Excellent question. Breaks are so beautiful. I love breaks. I usually, when I was a student, I had a practice buddy. That was my system. It's like I needed a buddy. I didn't need a buddy, but it was very, very helpful. It kept me in the practice room longer throughout the days to have a buddy. And so we would commit for an hour and then take a 15-minute break, and then commit for an hour and then take a 15-minute break, and just do that until one of us had class or you know, needed to eat or sleep or something. But for breaks, for me, I like to physically leave the room that I'm in. Like there's something about changing your environment. So you have something different to look at, something different to smell, like go for a walk around the building, change your environment, and try not to think about what it is you've been working on. Because if you can give your brain that space, when you do come back to it, there's something about the way that we learn. It's much more efficient when you come back to it after you've taken a break. So yeah, highly recommend breaks. I forget what it's called, but there's this like special approach to learning anything where you like commit without distractions for like 25 minutes, and then you take like a 5 or 10 minute break, and you come back to 20-minute chunks of absolutely uninterrupted focus. And that works really well, but you have to take your breaks, otherwise your brain is like, what? So, yeah, I like to change my location during my breaks. It's good. Maybe change practice rooms. Be like, okay, I'm here now. I don't know. You know, bad. Yeah.
So, okay, I wanted to ask if you could go back and go through your career again, what is one thing you would do differently?
I probably would have gotten that teaching credential that my dad wanted me to get. So after Cal State Fullerton, studied in Toronto, studied at University of Michigan, and then I had a choice. I'd been recruited to teach a class and a couple of students at Mount Sac part-time. And I was like, well, I can be broke and freelance here in the snow in Michigan, or I can be broke and freelance back at the beach with my family. And so I came back home knowing that I was going to be broke and freelancing. I had one job at the college and was supplementing my income. I forgot to add this to my shit job list. I was working at the IHOP, and I was so broke. I had 2 degrees and a diploma at this point, and was really broke. I was riding my bike to work, not even as a waitress at the IHOP. I was just a hostess, just paying my rent $500 a month to a family friend, because I couldn't move in with my parents. We knew we would kill each other. Yeah, so, yeah, I don't know, it all works out. But had I come back with that piece of paper, with that teaching credential, I could have just picked up with a full-time gig with Benny's. And I don't know, it worked out how it should have. Like, I think that hustle was important for me in the career that I've paved out as a freelancer and as a player. But if I had that teaching credential piece of paper, I could have just like done that during the day, and then, you know, it would have been a little bit more stable. So I think that's, I don't know if it's a regret. Clearly it just worked out, but that would have been helpful. So, yeah.
Do you have a moment in your career where you just like felt completely like burnt out, like you just couldn't do anymore, like wanted to switch careers, like that type of thing?
Yeah. And it doesn't help when you have, like undiagnosed depression, or maybe diagnosed depression, who knows. Transitions are very complicated. Transitioning from one school to the next, or transitioning out of school completely, is very, very scary. And you feel it not just from yourself, you feel it from your social pressure. Like, you might have parents who are like, well, what are you doing with your life? You shouldn't have done a music degree, or whatever, like all of this toxic, like, jibba jabba. And who knows what we're all dealing with in that regard. But I think trying to at least come to the neutral territory of a mental space. You don't have to be like sunshine and lollipops and be like, everything's fine, but you can come more over to a neutral zone where you're not being mean to yourself, and you're just kind of fostering and what you do like. For me, I realized that I really needed, during that time when I was, very broke, just out of school, trying to hustle, figuring life out, figuring out how to adult. I realized that nature was more important to me than I thought. So I got a little dog, and we went out on walks every day, because that's free. And she was my practice buddy, and she got me through a lot. Her name is Clara, after Clara Schumann, not clarinet.
That's why I named my clarinet. I named my clarinet
Clarinet! Yeah, no, it's, and that was really important, and I didn't realize that I was setting myself up for better mental health, because I was just going for a walk every day, despite my circumstances at that time. So at some point you realize that you have to advocate for you. If you're unhappy, it might be because of you. If you want to be happy, you might have to depend on you. And so kind of keep that in mind as we negotiate life, and we get to choose these people in our lives, but do be careful that you're not becoming codependent with these systems that you're creating socially, that you do have an internal positive dialogue, like, well, I pooped all over that, but tomorrow's another day and I'm gonna give it my best shot. And just, even if you feel like you're lying at first, try and have positive self-dialogue can be very, very healthy, especially later, because these tools that you're creating and using, and as you create yourself, as you become an adult, are going to be what you rely on when you are an adult, because it gets, lonelier and lonelier. But in a sense, it can get more fulfilling and more interesting, and I'm learning more than I ever have. I'm a better clarinetist than I've ever been. Like, it's just different as we go through life. But trying to stay, if you can't be positive, just get yourself to neutral territory, and that's a good place to start.
So we are out of time.
Oh my gosh.
If we could just give a warm round of applause.
And I work here, so you can just come up and talk to me if you want to flush through life and figure things out, or just chit chat. And I'm around, and I'm a weirdo. I'm weird, but that's okay. We'll figure things out together. But best of luck to all you guys. You're in the right place. You're doing the right thing. So trust your gut and work hard and be nice, and it's all gonna work out.